Have you ever noticed how some men just disappear when you show them you don't need them to be happy? Carl Jung, the famous psychologist who unlocked the mysteries of the human mind, said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to understand ourselves." Today, I'm going to explain why your emotional independence, the inner strength you've carefully built, can scare some men so much. If you've ever wondered why certain people step back just when you're at your strongest, when you've finally learned to stand on your own and realized your happiness doesn't depend on anyone, this video is for you. What I share here will completely change how you see those situations. The truth is, an emotionally independent woman represents something very specific in a man's unconscious, something Jung called a projected shadow. Once you understand this deep psychological dynamic, you'll never doubt or downplay your inner strength because of someone else's reaction. In the next few minutes, I'll reveal the psychological mechanics behind this phenomenon. I'll show exactly what goes on in some men's minds when they face a woman who doesn't need saving, and most importantly, how you can use this understanding to attract healthier, more genuine relationships. Stay until the end, because I'll share Jung's secret to truly balanced relationships. If this resonates with you, type "awaken" in the comments. Let's build a community of women who know their power. To understand why your emotional independence scares some men, we need to dive into what Carl Jung called the shadow projection. Imagine everyone carries inside them parts they haven't grown, fears they haven't faced, and insecurities they'd rather ignore. When a man meets a woman who has exactly what he lacks, emotional stability, self-knowledge, the ability to stand alone, a very specific reaction happens in his unconscious. Your emotional independence acts like a psychological mirror. It reflects back to him all the areas where he hasn't grown. If he can't be content on his own, your calmness will bother him. If he hasn't learned to manage his feelings, your stability highlights his own unrest. Jung said we project onto others what we can't accept in ourselves. A man who hasn't developed his own emotional independence sees yours as a threat, something that makes him feel small and exposes his weaknesses. It's as if your completeness points out his incompleteness. Here's the fascinating part. This reaction has nothing to do with you. It reveals his emotional state. A woman who has done her inner work, healed her wounds, built a healthy relationship with herself, becomes a catalyst. She awakens both admiration and discomfort in others, depending on their level of personal growth. Think about it. You no longer accept emotional crumbs because you know your worth. You don't tolerate mind games because you have clarity. You don't rely on external approval because your self-esteem is solid. To a man still stuck in immature patterns, your growth is unsettling. And you know what else? Some men were raised to believe the ideal woman needs them to feel whole. When you show up already whole, you challenge everything they thought they knew about relationships. It's like you rewrote the rule book, and that can be scary if you're not ready to play at a higher level. Your emotional independence isn't a flaw to fix. It's a trait that shows who's ready for a mature relationship and who still needs to do their own inner work. And that, my dear, is a powerful natural filter. Now I'll share something Jung discovered about the male psyche that few men admit to. He spoke of the anima, the feminine side in every man's unconscious. When a man hasn't developed his anima, his sensitivity, intuition, and emotional world, he looks for it outside himself, through women. Here's why your emotional independence becomes dangerous to some. If he needs a woman to feel emotionally complete and you're already complete, where does he fit in? Suddenly, he has no defined role. He's not the savior, not the emotional provider, not the one you can't live without. This triggers something primitive in an underdeveloped male ego, the fear of being irrelevant. If you don't need him to be happy, why would you choose him? That terrifying question echoes in his subconscious because deep down, he can't answer it. He hasn't built enough self-value to understand that healthy relationships are based on choice, not need. Jung said, the more we fear something, the more power we give it over our lives. Some men fear rejection so much they walk away before trying to build something real. Your emotional independence represents the real possibility of being judged for who you truly are, not what you can offer to fill a lack. Think about this. When you were more emotionally needy, how many men liked being your safe harbor? They felt important, needed, indispensable. But once you evolved into your own safe harbor, they lost that role. And to egos that aren't mature, that's terrifying. It's as if you took away their starring role in your life story. Now you're the star of your own life. They can be wonderful supporting characters, they can add value, but they'll never be indispensable for your basic happiness. That demands a level of emotional maturity many don't have. Some men grew up believing their worth in a relationship depended on how much a woman needed them. Remove that need, and they're lost, not knowing how to relate. It's like the script changed, and they don't know their lines anymore. But here's the beautiful part. Men who have done their own inner work, who have developed their anima and become emotionally mature, those men are fascinated by your independence. They see it not as a threat, but as a mirror of their own growth. They know that being with an independent woman means building something based on love, not codependency. Your emotional independence is a test of male maturity. It separates boys from men, wounded egos from evolved souls, and it's not cruel, it's efficient. Why waste time on someone who fears your strength when you could be with someone who celebrates it? Carl Jung identified something fascinating about the feminine archetypes dwelling in the collective unconscious. There is a specific archetype that awakens both admiration and terror in men, the whole woman. I'm not talking about the perfect woman. I'm talking about the woman who has completed herself, who has made peace with herself, who has integrated her shadows and embraced her light. This archetype is unsettling to some men because it challenges the age-old narrative that a woman must be conquered, protected, or saved. An emotionally independent woman embodies something that stirs layers deep within the masculine psyche. She represents the integrated anima, what every man ought to strive to develop within himself. Jung said, "We see in others what we need to cultivate in ourselves." When a man feels uncomfortable around a woman's emotional independence, he is, in truth, being confronted with his own need to evolve. Her completeness highlights his own incompleteness. And this can provoke two reactions. He either feels inspired and chooses to grow, or he resents her and withdraws. Men who recoil from independent women are usually still operating under primitive archetypes. The hunter who needs prey, the savior who needs a victim, the provider who needs a dependent. When you don't fit any of those roles, they become disoriented. It's like trying to navigate new terrain with an outdated map. But let's talk about what truly happens when you fully embrace your emotional independence. You stop sending those subconscious signals of neediness that attract men with savior complexes. You no longer tolerate behaviors you once accepted out of fear of loneliness. You develop a different energetic pattern, a magnetism that draws only those vibrating at a similar level. And here's the secret that few understand. Your emotional independence doesn't make you less attractive. It makes you selectively attractive. You no longer draw just anyone. You draw specifically those who are ready for a relationship of equals. Two whole people choosing to be together, not needing to be together. Jung spoke of the process of individuation, the path to becoming who we truly are. When a woman completes her individuation, she becomes a mirror for everyone around her. Some will see themselves in that mirror and feel inspired. Others will see their own limitations reflected and would rather shatter the mirror than do the inner work required. Your emotional independence is, in fact, an invitation for the men around you to evolve as well, to become whole, to do the work of knowing and developing themselves. But not everyone is ready to accept that invitation, and that's okay. You are not responsible for anyone else's emotional growth but your own. What's important to understand is that when you become emotionally independent, you are not becoming less feminine or less desirable. You are becoming a more authentic, more powerful version of yourself. And that naturally will attract those who are on that same level of authenticity and repel those still driven by fear and neediness. Let me tell you a story that perfectly illustrates what happens in the mind of some men when they encounter an emotionally independent woman. Imagine a man who has always had relationships where he was the woman's emotional center. She'd call him multiple times a day, craved constant validation, and grew anxious if he didn't respond immediately. He got used to this dynamic because, subconsciously, it fed his ego and masked his own abandonment fears. Now this same man meets you. You don't call desperately. You have your own life, your own interests, your own inner peace. You reply when you want to and when you can, not out of obligation or neediness. You show genuine interest, but not dependence, and something very specific happens in his mind. He projects his own unresolved fears onto you. Carl Jung explained that projection is a defense mechanism in which we attribute to others what we cannot accept in ourselves. When a man has unresolved abandonment fear, he may interpret your independence as disinterest, your calmness as coldness, your completeness as premature rejection. He starts crafting mental narratives. She doesn't need me, so she'll probably leave me. She's too independent. She won't commit for real. She doesn't show neediness, so maybe she doesn't truly love me. All these stories are projections of his own fears, not reflections of reality. The truth is, some men mistake neediness for love, dependence for commitment, necessity for passion. When you arrive without those signs, they don't know how to interpret your feelings. It's as if they only know to recognize love through the lens of codependency. Here's a practical example. You schedule a date, and the day before, an important work commitment comes up. You explain the situation, ask to reschedule, and propose a new date. A needy woman would over-apologize, maybe even cancel the work. Commitment. But you, being emotionally independent, communicate your priorities clearly and respectfully. To a mature man, that shows integrity, that you honor your commitments and communicate well. But to a man with unhealed wounds, it may read as disinterest or as if he's not enough of a priority. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." When your independence irritates someone, it's revealing that person's own insecurities. It's not about you being too much or too difficult. It's about him not yet having developed the internal security needed to relate to a whole woman. Some men have been conditioned to associate love with drama, passion with instability, interest with pursuit. When you offer mature, stable, conscious love, they don't recognize it as true love because they've never experienced it. And here's the liberating part. You don't need to diminish your independence to accommodate someone else's insecurities. You don't need to feign neediness so others feel needed. Your emotional evolution isn't a problem to be solved. It's a gift to be celebrated by those who have eyes to see. Now, I want you to reflect with me on something profound. How many times in your life have you dimmed your strength, pretended to need someone more than you actually did, or hid your ability to stand on your own just so you wouldn't scare off a man? If you're honest with yourself, this has probably happened more times than you'd like to admit. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how many women really allow themselves that privilege when it comes to relationships? How many betray themselves, diminish themselves, fragment themselves to fit the expectations of partners who aren't prepared for their whole version? Your emotional independence is the result of a journey. Perhaps you've been in relationships where you gave too much and received too little. Maybe you experienced the pain of placing your happiness in someone else's hands only to discover those hands weren't reliable. Perhaps you spent sleepless nights analyzing behaviors, trying to decode signals, living in the anxiety of not knowing where you stood emotionally. And then something changed. You decided that you would no longer live that way. You did the inner work to know yourself, to heal your wounds, to build a solid relationship with yourself. You learned that happiness is a personal responsibility, not a gift others can give or take away. You developed the ability to be fine on your own, to find peace in your own silence, to celebrate your own achievements. But here's what Jung teaches us about this transformation. When you become emotionally independent, you are not closing yourself off to love. You are opening yourself up to true love. You are creating space only for relationships that add to your life, not that complete it, because you have already arrived whole. Consider the energetic difference between a woman who enters a relationship because she needs it and one who enters because she chooses it. The first carries an energy of lack, a void that must be filled. The second carries an energy of abundance, a completeness that wants to be shared. These energies attract completely different kinds of men. When you operate from emotional independence, you are no longer available for psychological games, relationships based on drama, or toxic dynamics disguised as passion. You develop emotional discernment. You recognize harmful patterns before they can even take hold. You don't accept crumbs because you know your own worth. And that inevitably will discomfort men who have not yet evolved to that level. They will feel that you are too demanding, too independent, too difficult. But do you know what those criticisms really mean? That you have standards, that you value yourself, that you are not willing to settle for less than you deserve. Jung spoke of individuation as a journey toward becoming who we truly are, integrating all aspects of our personality and living authentically. Your emotional independence is part of that process. It is you honoring your own growth journey and refusing to regress to accommodate someone else's immaturity. And when you finally find someone who celebrates your independence rather than fears it, you will understand that the entire journey was worth it. Because true relationships are not about two halves completing each other. They are about two whole people choosing to walk together. Today you discovered that your emotional independence is not a flaw that needs fixing, but rather a rare quality that reveals the level of emotional maturity of those around you. Carl Jung taught us that he who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens. You have awakened. You have done the inner work that most people are afraid to do. Your emotional independence is a natural filter that repels those who are not ready for a mature relationship and attracts those who recognize your worth. It's not about you being difficult. It's about having standards. It's not about scaring men away. It's about revealing who is truly ready to stand beside a complete woman. Always remember, you don't need to dim your light so that others can feel comfortable in their darkness. You don't need to feign neediness to feed insecure egos. You don't need to fragment yourself to fit into relationships too small for your greatness. Your journey of emotional independence is sacred. Honor it, protect it, celebrate it, and trust that when the right person arrives, they won't want to change you. They'll want to know even more deeply the extraordinary woman you've become. If this video touched your soul, if you saw yourself in these words, leave a "awakened" in the comments. Share with a friend who needs to hear this. Subscribe to the channel for more content that honors your evolution journey. And remember, you are not alone on this path. We are a community of women who have chosen to awaken to our own power. Until the next video.